Hello, welcome to webinar number 3, grades 6 through 12, characteristics and supports. Today we'll cover characteristics of dyslexia in grades 6 through 12 and consider some possible supports and accommodations for those students. Might be important to cover the history of the word dyslexia and talk about where it came from. It was first coined back in the late 1800s by a researcher who was studying an adult who had lost his language capabilities after a head injury. So the word itself comes from two parts, dys meaning difficulty and lexia referring to language. Dyslexia can be difficult in language processing and manipulation in all of its forms, and we'll refer to that several times as we move through this. Oral language, auditory language, reading, and written expression can all be affected. Let's talk a little bit about the definition of dyslexia. It is neurobiological in origin, which means that it is embedded in the brain makeup in children and adults. It is characterized by difficulties with accurate and/or fluent word recognition and poor spelling and decoding abilities. This difficulty typically is the result of a deficit in the phonological component of language, which is the sound system beneath our print of language. Difficulties are often unexpected in relation to other cognitive abilities and the provision of effective classroom instruction. Secondary consequences may include problems with reading comprehension, reduced reading experience that can impede growth of vocabulary and background knowledge, which becomes particularly important for those secondary students. This graphic is from the work of Stanislas Dehaene out of his lab in France. It is a representation of the neural networks that are involved in communicating, reading, writing, speaking. And it's important to understand for our students that in the case of dyslexia, these neural networks are either non-existent or very rudimentarily formed. They are not efficient or effective in the way that these students are processing their language. Through remediation and intervention, these pathways can be created, improved, and strengthened through early intervention with structured literacy programs. Classroom characteristics that might be displayed in our 6 through 12 students would be slow, choppy, and laborious decoding. Now, many of our teachers may not have the opportunity to listen to a student as they read aloud, but this is an opportunity to observe some of their characteristics and note the time needed for a student to complete a reading assignment or compare them to their classroom peers and make note of how they might be keeping up or not keeping up with them. Our students often avoid reading out loud or reading tasks or refuse to do them entirely. It often takes them many more rereads to garner content and understanding from what they are reading. Students also often have difficulty in word finding. They may pause when they're speaking as though they're looking for the correct word or the correct term to say. They may verbalize a term that is similar in sound or in spelling, but not the appropriate term, saying things like distinct instead of extinct. They may also use blanket general terms such as things or stuff because they're unable to retrieve that appropriate term or word that they're looking for. Students with dyslexia often have difficulty interpreting proverbs, puns, or idioms. Remember, this is a language processing disorder and can affect language in all of its forms. They may have a difficult time understanding subtleties or non-literate language that you might find in puns or idioms. They may also have difficulty understanding humor or jokes, both that receptive language, understanding jokes, or also delivering a joke, possibly getting the sequence of events in a joke out of order, or have trouble with timing and the punchline. Dyslexic students often have difficulty with long-term memory for names, dates, facts, or sequences. They also have difficulty, again, with that language processing, which may lead to them taking an inordinate amount of time to complete their tests. Students with dyslexia might also have difficulties with spatial concepts, again, having to do with directionality, reading flat visual information such as graphs or charts or timelines, again, with directionality confusion or sequencing concerns. That information might be difficult to comprehend or understand for them. Sometimes our students with dyslexia have trouble with navigation and with driving, often turning the wrong way or having difficulty maybe reading a map. These characteristics were taken from the website understood.org, which is the parent arm of National Center for Learning Disabilities, and it's a wonderful resource for parents wanting more information and also for online trainings and webinars on any number of concerns related to learning or attention issues. We often hear about the gifted dyslexic, although there is no evidence to suggest that because you have dyslexia that you are therefore gifted. What we will see amongst all students is strengths in areas where their peers may not have them. Dyslexic students might be creative in their problem-solving skills. They can think outside the box or understand the big picture maybe a little bit better than their peers. Oftentimes they are strong in their people skills and creative, artistic, musical, or athletic. Some of those spatial weaknesses that they have for flat, two-dimensional inputs might not translate into those three-dimensional strengths. Sometimes we see them being quite skilled in math, mechanics, or computing. Dyslexia and all of these characteristics that we have mentioned exist on a spectrum. No two students who are at risk for dyslexia will look exactly alike, even those within the same family tree or even siblings. 1 in 5 is the statistic of students with learning or attention issues, so that is 20% of the general population. Taking into consideration that this is a spectrum, 20% of students will not be affected to the degree or to the severity that that would warrant diagnosis or special services within the schools. One student or 2 out of 5 might have a very mild or mild to moderate case where it wouldn't be apparent to their teachers or administrators within their school. If you're listening to a recording of this webinar, now might be a good time to pause and discuss amongst your group some of the students that you may be thinking about or students that you've had in the past, some of the characteristics that you've seen, and what your experience has been with them. Moving on to supports and accommodations, those fall into 4 categories. We have general, environment, technology, and social. We'll cover each of these a little bit and some examples of what those might be. Understanding that dyslexia is a language processing disorder and considering some of the weaknesses that we've discussed and going through our characteristics, we want to really match our supports and accommodations to the particular weaknesses that our students have. On the guidance document on pages 6 through 9, there is an extensive list of supports and accommodations. I encourage you to take a look at that and explore what might be helpful for some of your students. Note that not every student needs every support or accommodation that's listed in the document, but again, really tailoring those accommodations or supports to the student need. One that will almost benefit all students who are at risk for dyslexia is extended time. Language processing concerns mean that our students have the cognitive capacity, they just need some extra time to access it. Repeated review can be very important. We know that dyslexic students take many, many more exposures to information before they have that information mastered and committed to memory. So repeated review is really important. Anytime a teacher can provide notes or allow recordings, again, can level the playing field for a student who has difficulty with handwriting or difficulty determining what the most important pieces of a lecture might be, those key terms and main ideas. Again, with handwriting concerns, reduced copying or note-taking is always beneficial for those students. Models can help dyslexic students get a visual understanding of what the expectations are. Scaffolding and chunking helps students break projects down into smaller pieces so that they're not quite so overwhelming. Graphic organizers can be a wonderful accommodation for a student, again, to break down a task into smaller pieces, organize them visually so that they're easier to digest. Altering test format or test setting can be beneficial for a student who needs that information delivered in a little bit of a different format. Not penalizing a dyslexic student for spelling errors can be helpful. We know that spelling is a cardinal sign of dyslexia, and not accounting off for those spelling errors and really grading on content can make a difference. Allowing for dictated or typewritten homework, which is probably more commonplace than ever before, helps a student eliminate that handwriting concern and can save time both during school and after school with homework. In setting up a supportive environment for students at risk for dyslexia, routine can be very important. Knowing what to expect and when to expect it alleviates anxiety for all students, but can help the preparation and expectation for transitioning. Alternative seating for tests, either within the classroom or in another classroom, can be helpful, eliminating those outside distractions and allowing for extra time. Our dyslexic students are acutely aware of their peers who finish more quickly than they do and aren't struggling, so an alternative environment might be appropriate for them. Structured time for organizing and transitioning can be helpful in that finishing up their processing and giving them a little bit more time to get their materials organized, to close down their computer, open up a different browser, open up a different application, again, helps them to transition or close out one subject and move on to the next. Peer supports can be helpful. If there's a student in the class who is willing or available to be that student's touchstone to check in on and make sure that they have all the information written down for either an assignment or a project, just again, someone to check in with can be helpful. Next category would be technology. Almost all of our students now have devices, whether that device be issued by the school or one that they might carry around in their pocket. Those devices have a multitude of available supports built into them. And it's important that we match that tool or that app or that accessible material to the student's need. Ensure that that student would benefit from that and that they're well trained in using it and how to apply it in their classwork, and also that their teacher and their parent can support that student in using that educational material or that application or technology to the best of their ability. Knowing what digital resources are available to a student, whether that be an online textbook that has a read aloud option or audio supports that are available through the library, whether the school library or the local library, and what might be available on the device that they have that is built in and just might need to be accessed or turned on. Again, audio supports are a real game changer for students, particularly if they are cognitively capable of handling grade level content in science or social studies, but their reading level is not commensurate with that cognitive ability. Audio supports are a way that they can be on level with their peers and again have access to that same content. Some of the additional technology that is available on some of our devices is dictation, available on most Chromebooks or tablets built in. Word prediction software such as CoWriter Universal can assist in writing projects or written expression pieces. Text-to-speech such as Read and Write or Natural Reader can be downloaded to assist with, again, writing or report making. For note-taking support, Notability is an app that can be downloaded and used to support that need. In looking at leveled text, there's a list of websites that can be accessed and used for any number of content areas. If you have questions about assistive technology or what might benefit a student, I encourage you to reach out to Missouri Assistive Technology at moat.org and explore some of the things that they have in their lending library. They'll provide training for you, loan out devices and apps to you for you on a trial basis before you have to make a decision or a determination of whether you need to purchase that for your classroom or for your building. And the last area is social emotional. Again, we want to gauge frustration with our students, be aware of what emotions they might be grappling with as they go through their school day. Provide opportunities for them to demonstrate mastery that might be non-traditionally. Always give them positive feedback for efforts and the process as well as the outcome. We know that our dyslexic students are working very, very hard compared to their peers, often for lesser outcomes. And again, focus on student successes, building them up in an area where they often feel they'll never find success. Often our students might be strong conceptually in the areas of math or algebra. However, issues related to sequencing and memory and transpositions often hamper that success. We have many math programs that are also language-based, which presents an additional challenge for students to peel apart a long word problem and determine what the important pieces are, where they create their math equation, and then again perform that equation accurately. Some of the supports for math, particularly if there is a lot of memory involved, would be an example of a theorem or a procedure, a use of calculator for math facts, again, any support for the language that might be in a math problem. Consider it and being aware that transpositions and inversions often lead us to believe that a student doesn't have good understanding of math when that might not necessarily be the case. Science and social studies can be filled with higher vocabulary. Memory challenges will certainly come to the surface if there is again a process or a name, a date, or a procedure that must be remembered or memorized in the areas of science or social studies. We often don't think about PE or sports in related to dyslexia, but given that most of our classes now in the secondary grades have written tests that are associated with them, it's good to consider that a student with dyslexia will not be able to complete those tests in the same way that they might be able to perform in that classroom. In PE, just as an example, you might have a student who understands the rules of whatever content you might be covering, whether that be volleyball or soccer or badminton. But again, when it comes to taking that written test, might not be able to demonstrate that knowledge on paper. We also think about sports, and our dyslexia affects directionality and memory. Again, we might have an athlete who is on the basketball team or the football team or some other team that has challenges remembering all of the plays that they're required to remember out of the playbook, or might have issues with directionality and turn the wrong way on the field during a game. So these are all considerations to take into account outside of the classroom. Students with dyslexia might also be more artistic than some of their friends. They also are faced with written assignments or exams in those areas, and these might be your students who attempt to negotiate around those written assignments, offering to do other artwork or to assist the teacher in some way to get out of taking that written exam. Foreign language is another area where a student with dyslexia will certainly struggle. Given that they have trouble with language processing in their native language, it is very, very difficult for a student to master a foreign language. The alternatives that some schools are utilizing is American Sign Language, and although not available widely in public schools, is available at our local community colleges and is also being offered at some of our larger public schools. Again, not that is an expectation for graduation, but many colleges expect foreign language, and American Sign Language often meets that requirement. So we had a couple questions. How are districts assessing students in the older grades? I would encourage you to check the screening organizer that is linked up on our quick links box on the dyslexia page. That dyslexia page is found on the DESE website, dese.mo.gov. Go to curriculum through the Office of College and Career Readiness, and then find the dyslexia page, and through the quick links box you can access that screening organizer as well as a variety of other resources that might be helpful for you. Some of the schools that I have heard from in assessing older students are going to use a variety of different ways deciding at their building or district level. Some are going to use their MAP scores from the previous years. Others are going to take student or parent teacher input, and again, if they have some history with that student, others are going to use those that have been previously in title services, if those are available at your school, for determining which students might need to be screened for dyslexia. The 30-day timeline doesn't necessarily need to be in effect for those students in the upper grades, given that class sizes tend to be very large and teachers have any number of students and a limited number of time with those students. It's not necessary to have those students screened within the first 30 days. I have another question about what is the timeline for professional development for districts. We're looking at 2 hours of dyslexia-related professional development to be done at some time during this coming school year. So there's no pressure to complete that 2 hours prior to school commencing this fall. You can listen to one of these webinars during one of your PD days this fall, listen to another one in the spring, or do a combination of other PD. I encourage you to reach out to your regional professional development centers, and some of those that might be available to come directly to your district for a map of the state and which regional professional development center is in your area. That will be on the quick links box as well. There's also a link there to My Learning Plan, which is where those RPDCs post their trainings and professional development. Education Plus, the RPDC in St. Louis, has a separate website, as does the Southwest Center for Educational Excellence. Those are also on the dyslexia page. I encourage you to reach out to me if you have any other questions. We welcome your feedback. You can use this QR code or the link on this slide to get to our evaluation screen. You would pick the content area and the date and fill out a short survey. Thanks so much. My contact information is here. There is an Edmodo group. Should you choose to join it, the join code is there at the bottom, FSJ36G. Create a profile on Edmodo and request to join the group, and I will get an email, approve you to the group, and that will keep you up to date on happenings with at the state level and within the RPDCs. If there's research or any type of article, training opportunity that comes across my desk, I try to share that on that Edmodo page.